Hello and welcome to another edition of Contact with the Beyond Paratalk. I'm your host, Markus Verneutzer, and this is my special team. As co-moderator, we invited today Judith Miller. Welcome, Judith.
Hi, Marcus. Thank you for having me, as always.
It's nice to have you here. And our special guest is the author of the books Supernatural Encounters, True Paranormal Accounts from Law Enforcement, More Supernatural Encounters from Law Enforcement, and Evil in Exeter, Elliot van Dusen. Elliot, welcome. Nice to have you here.
Thank you very much for having me.
It was great to get you, and thanks to Judith. Judith, I give up to you.
Thank you, Marcus. Welcome, Elliot. I am very lucky. I've had the opportunity of speaking to you before. We know you're a diploma. You have a diploma in parapsychology from Stratford Career Institute. You've also a doctorate degree in the American International University, along with quite a lot of other training through different institutes. The question I would love to ask you to start off and kick this off would be, for you going back, I know you wrote a book in 2018.
Yes.
Your paranormal encounters, supernatural encounters. But for you, when did it all start? Was it whilst you were as a police officer, or after, or if you could...
It started before I was a police officer. So when I was really young, I knew that I wanted to be a police officer, but not just any police officer. I knew that I wanted to be a homicide detective. So I was really interested in the television show Unsolved Mysteries because it would show cold cases. But then every once in a while, they throw like a ghost story in there or a UFO story. And I thought that was really fascinating as well. And then around 1997, I discovered the television show The X-Files, which had already been on TV back in 1993. And I thought it was really cool that you had two law enforcement officers investigating the supernatural. So I decided to create my nonprofit organization, which still exists today, 27 years later, Paranormal Phenomena Research and Investigation. And we started to collect local folklore stories, ghost stories. And then when I moved to Halifax, I took my first two parapsychology courses from the Nova Scotia Community College and was invited to be a part of another organization that conducted investigations. So I got some field investigation experience, and then paranormal phenomena research and investigation kind of grew from there, from just collecting stories to actually going out and conducting investigations. And it wasn't really like a paranormal experience that got me into it. It was more just a fascination, interest. Now, since then, I have had a few things happen to me that I can't explain, which I find absolutely fascinating. And I mean, that's the reason why I do this.
You said there was something happened to you and you can't explain it. Tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so the first thing that happened was we were investigating an alleged haunted house in Kentville, Nova Scotia. The family had just moved into a century home. It was about just over 100 years old. One of their dogs had passed away, so they had seen the ghost of one of the dogs. They had seen an apparition walk down the stairs. They were finding pennies materializing all over the house. And they thought they were seeing up in some of their photographs. So they had found our website out to us for help. And obviously their case interested me. So I got my team together. We went down and spent an evening with them. Made sure, when we went to the house, that the house was clean and there wasn't pennies all around the house. And that we were there, really high electromagnetic fields, radiation coming from near the stairwell where they would see the female apparition, which was interesting. So we made note of that. And then about 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, the husband had gone to bed, and we were all sitting in the living room with the wife. We had a camera going in the kitchen, and there was only one way in, one way out. You had to come past us, basically. And every hour on the hour, I would get one of my investigators to go and check the tape recorder to make sure it's still recording and that the batteries were still good. And lo and behold, this one time when he went to go check, there was a penny that had somehow appeared at the base of the tripod. It was outside the camera range, so it wasn't recorded on video. Hear anything you could drop, you couldn't hear anybody bend down or put it over there, and the sound was really good. You could actually hear me ask the investigator to go check the tape. You could hear him get up off the couch. You could hear the springs rise from the couch. You could hear his footsteps get louder as he approached the camera, and then you can hear him discover the penny. So we thought that was extremely fascinating and wanted to come back to do a second investigation, and the homeowners had allowed us to do that and come back a second time.
What was the conclusion of this investigation?
So the second time that we went there, one of my investigators had actually seen an apparition in one of the upstairs bedrooms. So we were all downstairs, where the penny had materialized, kind of focusing on that area. But I also had two investigators outside watching the outside of the property. They had night vision goggles, and one of them could see somebody moving in one of the upstairs bedrooms. So I could hear him come over the radio asking who was upstairs, and nobody was responding. So he told his partner, I'm just going to go in, and he said, maybe the radios aren't working. I'm going to go in and check. You stay out here. So when he went in, he went upstairs, went and checked the bedroom. He opened the door and he saw the apparition of a little girl sitting on the bed. And by the time he composed himself, it was the first time he had ever seen anything like that. He radioed us to come upstairs to the bedroom. We all ran upstairs, but by that time, the apparition was gone. The room was frozen. It was completely ice cold, and I used to police up in the subarctic of Canada, so I felt that minus 40 degrees Celsius wind on your skin. It was like cold like that. And the EMF reader was going off when we went into the room, and as the room started to kind of warm up, the EMF reader had stopped fluctuating, which was also interesting.
Let me ask you here a question.
Yeah.
These cold spots, is it a sign for demonic activity? Or
it could
be something positive?
It could be something positive as well. Yeah, we've seen cold spots and hot spots actually in both good and bad kind of spirit cases. The interesting thing about cold spots is a lot of times you'll feel it and your body may react to it. So you'll get goosebumps or the hair will stand up on your arm, but the equipment doesn't actually pick up that temperature change. I've had it, both the point and shoot camera, which you do have to keep in mind that when the laser for the point and shoot thermometer, it only detects where the laser is. So it's usually going to pick up the temperature at the floor if the cold spot next to you. But the thermal camera that we have picks it up everything. So even when I used the thermal camera one time for a cold spot, my body was physically reacting to the cold spot. The camera didn't pick up change at all, which was really interesting, but very common for paranormal cold spots.
Yeah.
Judith, you have a question mark on your forehead.
You know me well. Yes. Well, as a spiritual physical medium, I understand that, because when we work with spirit, we can go very hot or we can go very cold, and it's really down to each spirit and their difference in energy. Well, as a physical medium, I work with spirit in a physical sense. So I'm very interested, during any of your investigations, I've had physical interactions with spirit. Did you yourselves as interviewers experience any personal physical interactions? Was it positives or maybe ones that made you nervous, or did you experience any of that during your investigations?
Yeah, I have. I've never had physical experience as in touching, but some of my investigators have. I know one of my investigators was at a haunted restaurant down in the basement where activity was reported, where the room is, and he physically felt somebody touch his shoulder, and he thought it was the other investigator that he was with. And when he turned around to look, there was nobody there. Now, I've seen physical stuff, like I've seen doors open and close on their own. I've seen doorknobs turn 3/4 of the way. I'm like, well, there's nobody else behind there. So, and there's nobody there, nobody running away or anything like that. You know, you try and rationalize all the rational explanations that you can think of. You know, I've seen electronics malfunction, for example. Someone had spoken into a phone and it said, hey, I'll spell it out because I know my phone will activate, but it said, hey, SIRI, Malik, dirty girl. And then the response said, in my realm, you can be anything. When we tested that on multiple different phones and different networks as well, both in Canada and in the United States networks, so AT&T and Bell Mobility, the response should have said, I just don't understand this gender thing. When we reached out to Apple about why the software would have responded in the way that it did at the haunted house, they had no explanation for why the iOS software at that time would have given that response.
During any of your investigations, also, you talk about energy, you know, the difference in energy, and energy affects everything we do. We are energy. Have you ever, during any of your investigations, discovered with investigating it that it was actually the residents' energy, and there maybe wasn't other life form, you know, other spirits or such, because our own energy can affect different things too. I know of personal cases where it wasn't spirit; it was just the energy within the home that was created within the home. Have you ever come across that where you've been able to say it's not haunted, it's not spirits, it's, you know, and give another explanation?
Yeah, we see that in poltergeist cases, for example. So over here in North America, when we talk about poltergeist cases, normally we're referring to it being caused by a living person or what we call a living agent, and we believe that it's occurring through recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis. Which basically is when somebody can alter the physical environment with their mind. And in the RSPK theory, the reason for it is that usually there's a lot of underlying trauma or emotional turmoil that's going on with that living person. And when you look at the cases, for example, Nova Scotia's had two major poltergeist cases. There was the Great Amherst Mystery involving a girl named Esther Cox. That was in the late 1800s. And then there was also a case in 1912 involving a young girl as well named Mary Ellen McDonald. Both of those girls had suffered a form of trauma. The first one, Esther Cox, was her boyfriend attempted to sexually assault her in a carriage. Shortly after that happened, the phenomena started at her house. And then with Mary Ellen McDonald, her father was killed in a mining accident, and her mother couldn't afford to keep all of the children, and they had to give Mary Ellen away. So not only did she lose her dad, and she was of the age that she would recognize, you know, her father, but then she was given away to strangers to be raised. Both those cases had, you know, underlying trauma associated to it, and shortly after the trauma happened to occur. So it's a very fascinating phenomena. I know mediums, when they go into homes where we believe it's being caused by RSPK, they don't actually sense the energy of a spirit. They'll come in and say, I don't feel anything in this house. And that's another indicator that it could be causing agent.
Yeah.
Let me ask you a question about the energy. If I go to a specific place, I can figure out easily when I get in if there is a low energy vibration or a positive one. I can feel it, I can see it. But for me, it was every time I knew there were spirits on this place, because they have a signature of energy who is more gray and dark. Positive beings, they have a signature on those places. It is like unseen light, yellow. And so until I'm 40 years in this area active, but I never could figure out where comes this negative energy. When you take contact with the other side and you ask, for example, about the devil, they say doesn't exist. The devil itself doesn't exist. There's a source of negative energy, and egregores and spirits developed by human beings because they believed in it take advantage of this kind of energy and use it in a negative way. They are not connected to source. They don't get the life energy from source. No, they get them by making up fear in people for negative energy. This means we created them, not source, not God. And so they make us fear that we have more of this negative energy for those of our creation in the astral realm. All these poltergeist appearances, things, can we locate this every time as an accumulation of energy from ourselves? Or is it maybe because someone is pushing us in this direction to suffer, to have fear, to create the environment they can survive? What is your thought about it, Elliot?
I can kind of see both sides of that actually. Certainly, like what you said, if somebody is going through a really rough time, they've had maybe a bit of trauma, or they're emotionally in turmoil, that it can project negative things into the environment. There's also, I mean, the power of the mind. We've seen, in Toronto, for example, Toronto, Ontario, they conducted what was called the Phillips experiment, where they sat around a table and they created a backstory for an entity that didn't exist named Philip, and he was able to start to communicate with them through raps. And I've also had cases where people are constantly projecting kind of negative thoughts and negative energy into their home environment, and all of a sudden some negative things start happening. They start seeing like a dark mass or dark shadows, things like that. Then on the other hand, if you in demons, for example, then that would kind of go to like the other side of it, where it's not the human causing it, it's the dark force that is kind of bringing upon that negative thing into the home and the environment. For example, a lot of people in demonic cases will report the feeling of like feeling oppressed, feeling depressed. And some people believe that it's the entity that's making them feel that way, that's wearing them down, that's off their energy. I've been in a home with a negative entity before, and you would get extremely tired. You just felt like you were drained of energy. But the minute you would go for lunch with the team outside of the home at a restaurant, you'd feel awake again, almost like you had just finished, 2 cups of coffee and you were good to go for the day.
I figure, sorry to interrupt you, only one commentary to this, what Elliot just said. I figured out as well that some of these spirit beings, they are in locations they can't leave. Other ones, they are connected to you. They go with you from one place to another place. It has something to do with the dark energy. Sometimes in houses, there are really dark energy and they can't go out. It depends as well in which continent you live. Sometimes, for example, I live in Mexico. My contact with the spirit world said to me, it is in every single house here in Mexico, a spirit family as well. Not directly a family, but people who are living with the human beings here together. But this is not in every part of the world like this. So it seems like there are specific laws between spirit people. They are organized like we here in human bodies, and they have on their own density, her own laws. They are organized. What do you think about it? Can it be, or they live only like this, like people without law? They are not organized. What is your thought?
That's very very interesting. I do think that they have certainly they have their own kind of science behind them. It's something that we don't yet understand. I do think that there is some sort of other realm that they go to. We know that through talking with mediums. Maybe even Judith has been told that there's a spiritual realm by some of the people she's spoken with, and same with yourself, Marcus. But I think that there's sometimes that people kind of get stuck in the in-between, where it's a spiritual force or human consciousness or whatever we are once we pass on from physical clinical death, and then they're trying to operate in the physical world with our known laws, and it doesn't come out quite right. That's why you might see a transparent apparition. They're not a full body apparition, or some apparitions don't know how to move things or get your attention. And we're told through mediums as well that it takes some time to learn how to use the mind to interact with matter. It's not just like when you pass away, here's a textbook on how to operate kind of thing. But I certainly would imagine that they would have certain scientific laws and things that we just don't yet understand, that they maybe have to abide by. Maybe it's part of their science. Like, for example, we can't go faster than the speed of light right now. Maybe there's some things that they can't do just because they're on that different energy level. And you guys have hit on the point that we're all energy, and different forms of energy, and we pick up on energy, and everything around us has energy and vibrations. I think that that's possible.
In my investigations, I figured out that there are densities. Densities, some people, they say dimensions, but dimension is a mathematical term. It has nothing to do with dimension. It is a density where it's an agreement from soul beings or not matter beings, where they agree about circumstances. They materialize like we do here in a specific way, but they on their own density. They live there like with a body, like we would touch it and experience it, but for us on this side, they are loosened. They are not materialized. But it seems like as well our oldest creations, they go back in time. If we say we speak to a being what is 2,000 or 3,000 years old, they speak as well Old Greek. They answer in Old Greek and. But it seems this kind of creations from us, they are so old and so intelligent, they must be organized. It can't be that they do it only, oh, well, I feel like doing this, let me kill this person, or let me make this person a bad being. There is a method behind it, how they pull people down on a specific vibration, that they can take advantage of this vibration. What can you tell us to it about this vibration, the low vibration? Did you interact with the spirit world on a higher vibrational level that you said, well, we had light beings and they told us about law of God and the purpose of life? Or did you ever have this low vibration experiences with moving things on tables, opening doors, and people are passing by and you can't touch through it? Or can you tell us about other experiences as well?
Yeah, I think that they both exist for sure. In the Exeter case that I investigated, that would have been considered a low vibrational entity, whether it was just an evil person or it was a demon, as some things kind of possibly indicated that it could have been. And then there's been cases, for example, we had one just last summer where it was a gentleman's father had passed away. He had taken a back while he was on vacation and didn't feel like it was his time to go. He wanted to stay and watch his family grow up, and his wife that was still alive as well. And then the family didn't have any issues in their home until after his mother had passed. His mother passed away. All of a sudden, this strange stuff started to happen within his home, and it was items, just regular household items like a hairbrush, a razor, some CDs. They would be taken from where they were, and they would be very symmetrically stacked around the house, almost as if somebody was trying to get your attention. And so they told their daughter about it because they were getting freaked out, and their daughter went on the internet and found our website and reached out to us and asked us to, contact her parents. So we did, and we interviewed them, and they seemed, normal. There was no mental health issues that we could detect, and they seemed like a, normal family. So we went out and did a field investigation, and we did use a medium for that one. And I was very impressed. And I told Judith the story once before, but my medium Jody had shown up. The only thing she knew was to show up on a certain date at a certain time, and she didn't know what type of case we were dealing with. She showed up. The first thing she felt as soon as she was male energy, felt a pain in her heart and numbness in her left arm, which we knew that the gentleman's father had taken a heart attack. She went into their garage and she could sense an item that belonged to that male energy. And she went over to the back corner and picked up a tape measure out of hundreds of different items she could have picked up. And she held the tape measure and she said, "This is the item that belongs to the male energy I'm feeling." We later confirmed it with the homeowner that, yes, actually that was his father's tape measure. She came in the house and she felt very on her feet, felt rocking, she described it as, and we found out it was she was having trouble standing on her left leg. The mother had her left leg amputated before she passed away. They were playing with cards, a card game, and they got up to get a drink one day, and one of the cards had gone completely missing. It was the six of spades, I believe. And so when she was given back and said, "What do you feel about this deck of cards?" She the fifth of spades and the which was right in between the missing card. Out of all 52 cards, those were the first two cards that popped into her. And then the last thing that happened was when we're doing like an electronic voice phenomena session or a seance, for lack of better words, trying to communicate with the gentleman's father. She was trying to get his name, and she could hear this puh 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 sound. So she thought his name was Peter, but then the son had said, "No, his name's not Peter." So she picked up the tape measure and said, he says his name's Paul," and it turned out that his name was in fact Paul. So we had all those different, what some people might call coincidences happen, but we were actually able to corroborate all of that information with the homeowners. And a gentleman died. He didn't want to leave his family, but what had happened to him is once his wife passed away, he made the sign to Jody because she's clairvoyant, so she gets like mental images. He went like that. He said, "My wife was gone just like that." So she had obviously made that decision to not kind of stay in between the spiritual realm and had gone over, whereas he had stayed behind, and now he was trying to get the attention of his son, and then ultimately it led to us down and followed up with the family just before this Christmas, and they said they have not had any other activity happen at the home since we feel that he made the conscious decision to move on into that other realm. That it was definitely
Judith, bitte.
Well, one thing, being a medium myself, I do feel it's important that we do stress, because there's a lot of people who work with energy, a lot of people who work with spirit and work in this field. So I do think it's important to stress that we can work with lower energy who are, they're fine, they're of no harm. They just are in this lower energy, but we can also work at a higher energy also. So I know a lot of physical mediums will work in the like red light and different things, which keeps within a lower energy. Now, I know my guides always say to me, there's no such thing as ghosts. There's only spirits, and spirits decide themselves that they believe in themselves that they're trapped, when really it's their consciousness explaining to them that they're trapped. They're not actually trapped. They're still in that cycle that they've never been able to break. So I find that all very interesting, but I am very aware of the difference, and I think it's important that we explain that, because people work in all different ways, but not taking away from the energy and that part. What I would like to ask is your book, you know, your first book that you wrote, Supernatural Encounters, you know, it was, Evil in Exeter in
Yes.
2010. Was that a true story?
Yes.
And how did they contact you, or did you come across a way to help them? How did that happen?
Yeah. So what happened actually is I had a girl on Instagram, and I had noticed that she looked a lot like Gillian Anderson from the X-Files. So I had commented on her picture saying, "Oh, geez, you look like Gillian Anderson." And she had sent me a private message, and she said, "Actually, I entered a competition once, and I won like top 10 Gillian Anderson lookalike." And she sent me a screenshot of the magazine article, which I thought was really cool. So we started getting to talk on Instagram, and I told her I was a Canadian police officer, and that, you know, fan of the X-Files, and that I have a nonprofit organization that investigates the paranormal. And she began to open up and tell me about her personal experiences, that she's been surrounded by ghosts her whole life. It started in her family home in Cranston, Rhode Island, when she was a little girl. Apparently, her parents used to see her walk around with her arm up in the air as if she was holding somebody's hand. She said that there was an old man that used to read to her or tell her stories when she was a kid. And as she grew older, said that there was something was kind of attached to her that was negative, and it usually seemed to happen when she was in a relationship with somebody. And she had told me that over the course of the years, she had three different mediums reach out to not her directly, but to her family members. Two of them went to her sister, I believe, and one of them was of Arabic descent. So he said, "You need to tell your sister that I sense she has a negative jinn attached to her, and this jinn thinks that she's hers and nobody else's, and, you know, displays behavior whenever she's in a relationship and tries to basically self-sabotage the relationship." The other medium had just said, didn't say that it was a jinn, but said that she had like a negative spirit kind of attached to her. And so I had flown down to Rhode Island to meet her in person, and we hung out for the weekend. She showed me a bunch of different haunted locations in Rhode Island, which was really cool. You know, went to see the original Conjuring house and the Devil's Footprints in North Kingston. There's a big folklore story behind that. And then the second time when I went down to see her, she invited me over to her house. But she said, "You know, when you come over to the house, things will probably start to happen, because that's where things would take place with this entity." And so, you know, I wasn't thinking anything of it really. I wasn't worried or afraid or anything like that at that point. And I went to her home and spent at least probably a week there, I think, initially. And sure enough, started to notice things. The kids were complaining of scratching coming from their wall that was keeping them up, and they never slept for 3 days straight. There was doors that would be found open that shouldn't have been open. There was locks, locking and unlocking by themselves. And there were like electronics being manipulated, kids' toys being manipulated, and televisions turning on and off, and the sound going up and down. So definitely, some strange stuff. So, I said next time I come down, I'll bring some of the equipment and we'll check things out. It is appearing to be a typical haunted house that we would get contacted about. And so when I came back down and had the equipment, it was a fairly new home. It was only like 7 or 8 years old. It was built in a new subdivision. It wasn't built on anything crazy like
Let me ask you that.
ground or a dump. I often tell a story about a house that was built on a dump that was having issues because of the methane gas and the static electricity that was coming up. Everything checked out to be normal, and even at one point around 1:15, 1:30 in the morning, fire alarms went off one night, and they weren't in sequence. The way the set up as if one should go off at the same time. These ones were going off at different intervals, and they would only turn off if splashed with holy water. And we even went to the extent of contacting Kitty, which was the brand that had made the fire alarms, and they had absolutely no explanation for it. And in fact, they sent the homeowner a few new smoke detectors to reinstall just in case they were faulty, but never had an issue after that one night of kind of activity that was displayed. And this went on for several months. I would go down and spend, anywhere from 2-3 weeks down there, would witness a bunch of things happen, try and document it as best we could with, photographs and the equipment. And we finally kind of resolved it back in, would have been November of 2018. We had to contact a medium because the family's priest wasn't available to come in and help kind of exorcise the house. And a medium had come in. She was of non-denominational faith. She used, sage and some other herbs. And we did a lot of like prayer and house blessing kind of chants and kind of, chi into creating a positive environment in this house. And the one interesting thing that had happened, two actually. One was a cold spot, like I told you. It was a cold spot that we felt that our bodies physically reacted to. We had goosebumps, we had hair stand up, but the thermal camera didn't pick up anything on that. And then as the medium was calling the entity over towards her, all of a sudden, myself and the homeowner standing next to me, we were looking at the thermal camera, and we could see these dark, distorted footprints appear across the bed, walk around the pie plate, and go over towards the medium. And when I do demonstrations for people with the thermal camera, I usually put my hand on the wall in my lectures and then pull it away and then use the thermal camera. And body heat is usually detected the opposite color. It's not like a dark black or a blue color. It's usually it's a hot red because it's picking up. So whatever had walked across the bed didn't leave a heat signature, a cold signature for all intents and purposes. Very, very active house. It was the most active investigation I had ever been involved with, and it was certainly one that really opened my eyes to not provoking the unseen world that you can't see, because there were times that we would do some religious provocation and do some things to kind of stir up the activity and learn some hard lessons in that case. Yeah,
everything's a lesson, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I definitely learned a few things not to do in that case.
So in this case, you didn't know exactly what is the reason for this activity, because it seemed like all was normal. It was a very normal place, a normal situation, and suddenly it picked up. Judith, you as a medium,
yes,
do you have an explanation for this kind of situation? What can be the point? What can be the reason that something activities picking up?
Well, I'm actually giggling because I kept going like this and I've written it down. There's a little boy tapping on my left side, trying to get my attention with this, and he's tapping away. And I'm not sure if it's connected. No, it's not. They just said no, it's not. But for some reason, this little boy is trying to get my attention. But personally, as a medium, when I anybody that I would connect for experiences the physical. That's just, we all work in different ways, which is why I was saying it's important to be explained about the different energies. But I have found where loved ones really just don't want to leave. They're worried that if they cross over, they're not going to be able to come back and visit. So sometimes they stay around. I've had cases where it's ancestral, it's to do with the land. Other cases where it's the person's energy, like you said, themselves. So it can vary, but a medium will always be able to tell you when you go on to like property, or even when you connect with somebody. And I am being told there's a little girl. So there was a little girl involved in the one in Exeter. I want to tell you that there's a little girl because they've just said, but sometimes they don't know, they've crossed, they're still trying to understand that. And it's really, a medium is good because they can tell you the history behind it. They're able to connect in with the loved one and with the spirit, and they're able to tell you the full history. I've had it where people didn't want to leave because they thought they weren't going to be able to come back. And once, you sat and you explained to them, it's okay, you can come back anytime and visit. They crossed over. So it was fear holding them back. But sometimes it comes across to us, as moving objects. You think, oh gosh, there's something. It's not that it's negative. It's just your first reaction might be to be, that door just closed, that coin's just been left there. And as you said, Elliot, people are their spirit are trying to get your attention, and it's not necessarily negative attention. It's very much, because of the way I work, it's very much showing you they're still around, but they can still physically interact with us in all ways. And because I work with spirit, I'm also understanding that spirit evolve like we evolve. So how we seen things maybe in the 1800s, 1900s, things has progressed massively from there, as to what spirit can do and what they thought they couldn't. I've seen spirit work through, radio stations, work through electricity, work through solid objects, work through water. That there's nothing really they cannot do, and they're understanding that now, whereas before we were quite limited and our mind was quite limited. So it'd be very interesting. That's something I'm very interested in, is the energies, but not taking it away from the spirit side, because I know we're going to run out of time shortly. I wanted to touch on the UFO sightings, and I understand it was from law enforcement and everything, but is there anywhere you have particular story where maybe somebody has really vivid, not imagination, that's the wrong term, sorry, really vivid memory of everything that happened to them to come back? Did they go anywhere? Did they come back?
Not that I have personally interviewed. Like, nobody has come to me and said that they were an alien abductee. I do find the phenomena very fascinating. I know some people have linked, kind of spirits and even demons to aliens. It was very interesting, actually, at the 2023 Halifax Paranormal Symposium. I had brought in Dr. Richard Gallagher, who's a psychiatrist at Columbia University, and he believes in demonic possession. once he rules out, obviously, any sort of DSM-5 mental illnesses. And towards the end of his lecture, he actually had thrown out, it was only for like the last 5 minutes. Most of it was talking about demonology and mental illness. But for the last 5 minutes, he talked about his belief or his theory that extraterrestrials are actually demons, and that, when they come to visit us, there was a lot of comparisons that he was making between demons and extraterrestrials and our human experiences with them. And I know that like upset people in the crowd, because you kind of had people two separate, topics basically, and he's trying to use one unknown.
Yes and no.
But it was very, very fascinating to listen to him speak, because that was his opinion and his idea, and like we can't really disprove it. You know what I mean? Like, because there's just so much in the paranormal that we can't prove or disprove right now.
Let me here cut in and tell you something about it. What is my experience? It was one of my first experiences in the paranormal field in the age of 6 years. I was in my room and staring out of the door. Suddenly, two shadow people were passing by. You couldn't see the face, they were only gray. Gray head, two people, one tall, one very short. I was shouting, who is that? Who is that? To my mom. She was alone at home. She was coming in and she didn't see anything. And I said, there are two gray people walking on the floor. You didn't see it? And she was looking through the whole apartment. She couldn't find anything. My father was still on work. He came back. He was shocked. And this was so in the early 70s. And the shadow people didn't speak about something like that. It came up in the 80s. And there is something what was quite interesting from the Russian KGB Secret Service. They had a handbook about ETs. And one of these ETs was classified as a person between two dimensions. This means half in our dimension, half in the dimension of spirit beings. So here, first point, it is very interesting. We can say, wait a minute. We speak every time about the realm of dead people. It is basically only one other dimension of many, many dimensions where living beings exist. These gray people, they are supposed to be in a dimension between our dimension and the dimension of where we go back after our life. So they appear like shadow people, but on their own, in their own dimensions, they have a body like you and me. They are much more further in many, many things, but they are not friendly beings. But they are not bad beings in this way that they want harm for humankind. No, basically, they try to figure out the strength and weakness of people on this side. And the purpose...
Grey and white. The spirit will show you themselves in grey and white, grey or black.
I didn't get it. Can you repeat it, please?
Okay, so when we see spirit, spirit will always be like grayscale or grey or white or black, but if we see them in color, we're seeing them through the mind's eye, through our chakras, through our energy centers. We're seeing them in color. So,
but this was not the point. The point that they were grey.
Who was it you seen in the grey? Was it like what form were they in? Is what I'm asking.
The classical shapes they had. They had a head, a long trench coat, but all was grey. It was like a shadow without a shadow staying in the middle. The grey comes from their own vibration. Like I said, I see light beings in yellow. I feel the vibration is very high. And so darker they are, their own vibration, I see them with my inner eyes, dark, from gray to really dark or black. But those ones were very special because I could see them without a shadow. They were the shadow. They had shape. They had what came out many, many years after that. Many people had seen the same people, shadow people, every time with a hat. So, like in the 50s, the hat people were used to wear. But what I just were trying to tell you that they were in real aliens between the dimensions came from a Russian handbook from the KGB, from the Secret Service of the Soviet Union. What you can find nowadays still in the internet, but heavily modified, about 70 species of ETs. And this grace is one sort of those ETs. So after now 40 years, more than 40 years working in this area, what we identify as Earth, as our purpose of life, is nothing else than one school dimension where we live to experience life with all problems, all possible problems. But what we call ETs, we are ETs as well because we come here to have an experience of meta life, but we go back to an area what is our home. And of, from this dimensions, there's not only one, there's a waste of dimensions with different beings, very similar to us, very different, very good beings, very bad beings. So basically, if we speak about the paranormal and ETs and spirits, we speak about the same, only we love to separate it. And what the person said, that demons are extraterrestrials, I tried to explain now that these demons, if they are negative, they can be beings from other dimensions, but they appear for us not completely, translucent maybe. And
There
in
is
general,
translucent. I've seen the
in
translucent.
general, yeah, in general, we can't separate it. It is basically, in my point of view, the same. That's the reason I don't say this man who said, "Oh, they're extra for ETs, and it is a different thing." It is for me the same. What do you think about it, Judith Elliot? Can you agree to these ideas, or do you have a different opinion?
Well, personally, I just have to put it out there. We're all in the same dimensions. We have many life form walk amongst us. We're just not privy to it because we're not of that vibration to actually see them in the form that they are. I understand I've seen translucent, I've seen different forms where it show me very much, but it's the logic mind feels the need to separate it. The logic mind feels, personally, spirit would guide me, talk to me and explain to me that there is no separation amongst any of it. It's like polarity. It's
vibration.
Where we see it. Yes.
I think all the dimensions are in one place. What makes it different is the vibration. This means a higher being can see the vibrations or the densities or the dimension below their own one, but they are in the low one dimensions. They can't see what is above.
But we can too.
But
because we can too. So if I could explain it, so we assume that we have to wait until we transition before we can make our way through different parallel worlds. When we don't have to wait, it's like remote viewing. We can do it instant. I do it in my development classes with my students. We can set, everything is intention, very strong intention, and you can travel instantly. So if you want to set the intention, you can set the intention, and you will be instantly. You are where you're asking to be taken to. You'll be able to describe it. You'll be shown. You'll be given messages. You can fully interact completely. You just have to.
But is it higher dimension or the same dimension in a variation?
It's our vibration that we're changing. You know, I always say to people, it's not the people around you that change, it's us. So
yes, but here's a very important point: is you say you can visit all densities, realities, but how you get a match to this density, to this reality, if you not get a higher vibration?
No, you have to match that vibration. Exactly. And it's down to us as to, it's like anything, it's the more work you put in, the more you get out of it. So the higher you can raise your vibrations and work with your energy, that you can connect and link in many places. But it's self-care. We have to look after our own energy, and we have to. It's like if we're asking for something, there's no point in asking for it if we don't believe it before we ask. So it's very much the work we put into ourselves. But we with our power of the mind. Our mind's a tool. It is purely a tool. And Spirit would say to me, you know, we're working with like a quarter of we do telepathy every day. We do so many things, but it's only now that we're going, okay, actually, I can do this, and we're actually attempting to do it. Whereas before, we were quite closed off, and it was quite restricted and quite guarded. Whereas when you open up and go, okay, let's try this, you very much surprise yourself as to what the mind is actually capable of doing.
Mm.
Very strong.
Elliot, what are your thoughts on it? Vibration, spirit world, ETs?
I'm certainly to all those possibilities, really. I mean, just the vastness of the universe, and you know, most scientists would agree that there's probably other life out there. Whether or not we've been in contact with them or not is another story. But just for, you know, the known amount of stars there are, and that's within habitable zones, you know, that there's probably the universe is probably teeming with life out there in different variations of what that may be, whether it's microbial or, you know, beings like us. And as far as the spiritual realm, like I certainly other kind of realms, or like you said, vibration areas. I even look at in haunting cases now where we look at infrasound, which is sound that we cannot physically hear with our hearing, but still occurring in the environment, and it can actually have effects on us. You know, physical and psychological effects on us. So there is an example of something that exists that we can't see. And then that's just one example. So what else is out there that we can't see, can't hear? It's just not meant for us, you know, with what we have, our vision, our hearing, all of our senses, you know.
And why it is limited for us, if you look at the possibilities of a dog, of a cow, of a horse, they see more than human beings do. They can hear more. Why our ones, our hearing skills, seeing skills, why they are so limited? And for other animals, they can see in realms we can't. or we can't hear. It's quite interesting.
Yeah,
But
yeah, and like you said,
you know,
even just variety on Earth. Like dolphins can sense things that we can't, and other
exactly.
animals can pick up on vibrations that we can't. So, yeah,
Conditions, everything, yeah.
I think
But they're
I think
more
there's
open.
whole possibility out there. Yeah, for stuff that we don't even know about yet.
Yes, and we are almost over with the time. Dear audience, if you liked our little paranormal talk today, then give us up a thumb and an hide the next time when we are on a line sending one of our videos, and join us again when Judith Miller, an interesting guest, and me say, welcome to Contact with the Beyond Part Talk. Thank you so much for being with us, and until the next time, take care. Bye.
Take care.